Okay, I'm Margaret Wurtenberg. I'm the voter services person for the League of Women Voters of Weston, the Weston League of Women Voters. And we're here in the lovely Weston Library, which is hopefully going to get enlarged. But in the meanwhile, you should know that at 1:30, I think, this afternoon, there'll be a lovely reception here for this new artwork. But that's not why we're here this morning. We're here for a debate that's contested for the Police Commission, and I turn it over to the moderator superlative.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. I'm Jean Rabineau. I am from Trumbull. I have no knowledge of what's going on in Weston. I take the questions as they are submitted to us. The rules for this debate are very simple. The first candidate to get any particular question will have 2 minutes to answer, and then each of the other candidates will have 1 minute for a follow-up answer. The first question goes to Mr. Brady first, the second question goes to Mr. DePasquale first, and so on down the line. In general, there will not be rebuttals, but I will make an exception in certain very limited circumstances, or if the candidates notify me that they really feel that they have to say something, in which case the rebutting candidate will get 30 seconds only. If you have questions, Margaret, are you going to be the question runner, or who's going to run questions? Okay, wave your hand if you have a question. The cards will be brought up to me. There are not going to be opening statements as such. The first question goes to Mr. Brady first. It is, the police budget is made mostly of salaries. Is there any way to reduce the increase in the police budget over time?
Yes, it's quite possible to reduce the budget. Salary-wise, it's difficult when you have your employees who are in a STEP program, and the STEP program is that each year that they're with the force, they move up a step. Plus you have your union matches as far as the price increases, I should say, 2.5%. That is added on too, and that's what raises the salaries for the police commission. Of course, when people retire, then you're taking your high salaried employees, they're retiring, and you're bringing in some new police officer at starting salaries. So there's a possibility to save there. And we do have a number of officers that are getting to that point where they may retire.
Okay, Mr. DePasquale.
So I think you mentioned reducing overtime as part of that question. So specifically, I am on the overtime subcommittee that was given the objective of reducing overtime significantly because prior years it's been a big part of the police department budget in Weston. What we were able to do is reduce overtime by double digits, which we were very, very proud of. The overall budget for this fiscal year is actually less than last fiscal year. So to see a department operating to the level we operate and doing it for less money than prior years saves the taxpayers some money in some way. At least it's a good sign and makes us feel good. I don't know dollar for dollar how much the police department budget does save the taxpayers, but significantly when we reduce overtime, we reduce the overall budget. We've done it with better systems, we've done it with better management planning, and we've done it with a better chief, captain, and command staff. So it's just been good management through good training that's reduced the overall budget.
Okay, Mr. Mueller?
Sure, thank you. It's interesting the way the question was read, whether it's reduced the budget over time or the budget over time. And there are different answers for the two of them. It's very hard to dispute anything that either Bill or Jess said. I mean, the commission and the department has done an excellent job at addressing a key budgetary issue in the town. And most of you here have been to lots of other budget meetings over the years, and I know from my time as a selectman, the difficulty in addressing some of the embedded costs, the contractual obligations. And so I think that you say, how do you cut a budget? Well, the only way you can cut a budget when it's this small and there's as little flexibility is by addressing manpower issues or man or people or women power issues and the number of staff that you actually have. And I don't think that anyone in town would advocate start trimming staff to reduce a budget. So you do look at as officers age out, and you do have that replacement capability. That I see is really the only way that you can address an inbuilt structural cost, and that's obviously what the police commission has to address.
Ms. Grelnick?
I agree with David. It's very difficult for us to reduce major costs in our budget because of contractual obligations. The way to do it is through retirement when an older officer retires and the newer officer is paid at a lower rate. We've done a great job in reducing our overtime since we hired Chief Henyon with greater management controls. And I think that's the right direction to go in, and we've been successful so far, and I'm hoping to keep up the good work.
Okay, thank you all. Next question will go to Mr. DePasquale first, and it's one of several that we got submitted on traffic, and it is, what are the worst trouble spots for traffic in town?
Well, there's quite a few, and we do hear about them at the monthly meeting because people come, and they are very verbal in telling us what is going on their road or their intersection. We have been successful in fixing this year, and we try to do 3 or 4 a year, some of the major ones that people were complaining about. So what they are, in Lions Plains Road, we fixed an intersection by Cartbridge. It had a few near misses. It was a very dangerous intersection, and if you go past Cartbridge and Lions Plains, you'll see the work done over there. It's certainly much safer. We put up stop signs. We put up prepare to stop signs. These stop signs glow in the dark with reflective material. Not really, but they're much more visible than certainly what was there before. We also fixed the intersection if you go past Emmanuel Church, at the stop sign where Davis Hill, Kellogg Hill, and Valley Forge all meet. That has been a very disorganized intersection for many years. Nobody knows where to go, how to go, who stops first, and so on. So we fixed the line where you stop. We moved the stop signs. We have new stop signs installed. And what I've observed so far, because I live over on Pheasant Hill Road, it's a much safer intersection due to that. We also put a stop sign on North Avenue and Lions Plains Road. A lot of people would cut quickly over from Lions Plains going south down North Avenue. That was unsafe, and a lot of people would speed in that area. That was unsafe, and in general, it was an intersection that required attention. The last one probably that was most important is River Road, where it meets Good Hill. That was all repaired. If you go past that, you'll see that there's a much safer situation there. And I think in general, we work hard to respond to the public.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mueller?
Yes, thanks, Jess. Well, I think that the worst spot for traffic is at the end of my driveway, apparently. Pulling out onto Weston Road during rush hour, which is increasingly more like a rush 5 hour, is emblematic of some of the issues you have. And it's the whole issue with getting into School Road from onto Weston Road, especially for any commuters. That is, from my perspective as a resident, one of the most frustrating times, morning and evening. It certainly gets at a broader question of enforcement, and with a team the size you have, how many officers do you want out patrolling and enforcing? I think that the mobile monitors that are placed around town, no one likes to be reminded that they're breaking the law. They may know they're doing it, but when you get that reminder how fast you're going, that seems to work. So I think that the continued placement of monitors around town, I saw online last week, a woman decided people were speeding too much. She sat outside her house with a hairdryer, and that was enough to convince people that it was a traffic gun. So, again, you're not going to find huge disagreements among all of us. The 3 members of this commission who are incumbents have done a stellar job at working to address many of these issues, including this issue of placement of monitors and enforcement. And I think that it's ensuring that in the hours that they have available, being out, being visible, and enforcing the rules from everything from speeding to rudeness to holding cell phones. Those are all issues that are significant for the town. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Grelnick?
Jess and David identified what our major road problems are in town: Cart Bridge, River Road, North Avenue, Lyons Plains, the intersection of Valley Forge, Kellogg Hill, and Davis Hill. And we've done a lot to alleviate the situation. What we need is better enforcement by our officers and better ways of controlling the speed. That's one of our major problems in town, is speeding. As David mentioned, we call them pizza boxes. They're put up there to give people an idea of the speed they're going, and they do work. They do help. We don't have enough. Perhaps we need more, and we do need better enforcement, and we will. Our chief is a past member of state police, and he is well aware and has expertise in the area of traffic enforcement, and that will help us in the future.
Mr. Brady?
We're well aware of the problems with the roads that have all been mentioned here by our commissioners and David. The three intersections that were mentioned by Commissioner DePasquale happen to be the three intersections we approved this year in order to concentrate on and fix. We're going to do that each year. There's going to be another three intersections that we'll end up fixing. You've noticed all the new signage around town. And at night, especially when you're coming down with your lights on, those signs really show where you are, the stop signs and so forth, the intersections. So that's been working very well. When you complain about specific speeds on a road, we do respond. We only have two people on patrol, two patrolmen on patrol. Each time they're out there, they have the north sector, the south sector. But, Lyons Plains Road, in one particular case, the chief said, okay, now we're all going out there on Lyons Plains Road. So we did that one day and we stopped 29 cars. So, everybody in town exceeds the speed limit a little too much. You've got to slow down. You've got to stop for these stop signs. I know you're getting used to the stop sign that's there at the end of your road, and you say, well, if I don't see any headlights or if I don't see anybody coming, I'm just going to keep on going. No, that's a dangerous situation. And David had mentioned the private roads. Of course, many of us live on private roads. Coming out of my road is treacherous, has been for the last 38 years. But you have to open your window. You have to turn off your radio. You have to listen for traffic, okay? Because sometimes you can't see it coming. Even with a mirror there, sometimes you don't see it. This morning, I pulled out on my road. There was nobody in that mirror, and all of a sudden, a guy comes flying by me, double line, and he must have been doing 50 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. I mean, that's just ludicrous. You can't be doing that in the town of Weston.
Okay. The next question is going to start with Mr. Muller, and it's about adding technology. Why can we not consider red light speed cameras to ticket speeders, or do we need any more traffic lights based on volume increases? Mr. Muller.
That's a response. I mean, that's a question that works for a big city. I don't think there would be much receptivity in town to have traffic cameras. I think the balance between feeling that Big Brother is always watching and the small town nature and the collegiality and the relationship that people have with the police department would not make that an attractive alternative. Red light monitors, I think that question is ultimately getting back to what we discussed in the last question, which is the concept of enforcement. And enforcement is not necessarily knowing when someone's going to be watching. Because when you know that there's a red light camera, your Waze tells you, warning police ahead, warning red light camera ahead, and you behave for that moment. But it's more about changing pattern of behavior than kind of the bell and reaction when you know that there's you know that you're going to get caught if you do something wrong at a specific intersection. Because what you need is changing overall behavior everywhere, not just at those sections that are monitored. So yes, technology can work. There are advantages to having alternatives to a pair of human eyes, but I don't think in a town of our size of 10,000 we want to start installing cameras that are monitoring behaviors.
Okay, Ms. Rowland?
I agree with David. red light cameras in the abstract may seem like a great idea, but I don't think they're practical in a town like Weston. We talked before about budget concerns. That would be part of a major budget increase to get those kind of cameras. It goes back to better enforcement, and we are working on it and will continue to work on better traffic enforcement, giving our officers the opportunity to stop people. We give out warnings now. If it's egregious, we give out a ticket. I think we need to see more of that, and we need to stop more speeders and more people who are texting while driving. So I think that's really the way to go. Technology can help, but it's not the solution for everything. And in this case, I think it's just good old police footwork.
Okay, Mr. Brady.
I believe from a traffic camera standpoint in the state of Connecticut that at the current time they're illegal. So you wouldn't be able to use it. Somebody can fact check that for me. But when you're talking about state roads like Weston Road, the intersection at School Road and Weston Road, we've been trying to get that fixed for the past 4 years at least. And our intent is when you're going southbound to actually have a left-hand turn lane there. If anybody goes southbound on School Road, when the buses are coming in and the children are being driven by their parents or the seniors are driving their own cars, you'll find that there's a lot of congestion, yeah. It goes all the way back to Cobb's Mill intersection. So that, and when that gets fixed, that ought to alleviate that problem. All the rest of the town roads, quite frankly, the stop sign is what we utilize when necessary, and stop signs aren't there for speed control, they're there for safety reasons only.
Okay, and Mr. DePasquale.
The idea of an actual camera in town, I think, was answered by the other people on this panel very well. What I would propose is continue what we're doing relative to speed trailers and what's called pizza boxes, and that's the feedback you get when you're going too fast and you see your flashing speed. What we have found out, because these two items do collect data, is that people do slow down when they realize how fast they're going and they see something flashing back at them. Many times there's also a flash where people think a picture's being taken. We've heard that around town, and that isn't the case, but it does get people to slow down. It may be temporary, but if you put enough of them around town, it is a deterrent to people speeding. At the end of the day, what really has to happen is people themselves in Weston have to realize that for safety's sake and to prevent accidents, you have to slow down. Much easier said than done. But what I would like to do, and what we've discussed on the Police Commission from time to time, is a PR campaign that would let people know how many accidents have happened this year, the benefits of slowing down, what could happen if people speed on the types of roads we have, which are windy, and with coming into a fall season, when the leaves get wet, it increases the danger. So all of those things, as well as our officers monitoring, are going to be what's important to keep people in Weston a bit safer on our roads. We do know it's a problem, and the ones that are more severe, people come to the Police Commission meetings, which I would welcome everyone to come and tell us what's going on their roads. Many people monitor the speeds on their own roads, and that helps us in our enforcement efforts.
Okay, thank you all. Next question is going to go to Ms. Gralnick first. Should the Police Commission play a stronger role in school safety? And specifically, are we doing enough to prevent or respond to gun violence in the schools?
The Police Commission and the Police Department play an extremely strong role in school safety. One by one, I'll go through some of the things that are done. You've all heard of the Mile of Safety. We have an officer patrolling during school hours up and down School Road. obviously, we have two wonderful SROs, school resource officers, who really help in these instances. Our department's probably up in the schools once a week, going through various drills with the Board of Ed, with the administration, with the students, lockdowns, things of that nature. Our officers also train a number of times a year. We've had in the past active shooter training. These are things you don't want to hear about, but we are very, very aware of potential problems. And our department is great. Our chief is great, our captain's great, all our patrolmen are great, and they are well aware, and they're always around the schools. Yes, we can always do more. Everybody can always do more. But I have to tell everybody in Weston that I firmly believe we have one of the best police departments who are well aware of potential problems and can nip them in the bud before they happen.
Okay, Mr. Brady.
When we talk about school safety, you're also talking about the beautiful campus. It's very unusual for the town of Weston because we have all of our schools on School Road. We call that the mile of safety. The other thing is that we have the senior center there too. We have 2 patrol officers that are there in the morning and in the afternoon, and we have the 2 SROs. So at the very minimum, typically you have 3 to 4 policemen prior to and after school. The other thing that we have on the campus, and most people don't know about it, is the forensics lab. And that forensics lab, there are 10 towns that belong to this, and from Greenwich all the way down through Norwalk, Wilton, and Easton. And Weston is the hub for that. We control it. These people, each town has 1 police officer that's assigned to that forensics lab. So there's a possibility that you might have 10 officers in that forensic lab on campus at any time. When we have mutual assistance with all of these towns, so if there were ever a problem, the gun violence as spoken to, if there were ever a problem, you have your PD is right here. So you have everybody that's in the police department at that point in time. You have your chief, you have your detective, you have 2 sergeants, and you have your whoever else may be there visiting, okay, that can respond to these types of things. So you would flood the campus, quite frankly, with patrol officers. The other thing that we have, besides the mutual assistance, is just the visibility of everybody. Even the chief and the captain, at times you'll find them on school campus, standing outside of school or driving up and down. So when you go in there, when the parents go in there and the school buses go in there, I think the kids feel safe, okay? They know that they're being watched over, if you will. It's a difficult task, but, from a gun violence standpoint, the other thing is that we do go through the schools constantly.
That's time, I'm afraid.
Okay, and train all the officers.
Okay, thank you. Mr. DePiscolo.
That question is very dear to my heart. I'm the only commissioner that still has children in the school system. I have 1 child in the middle school, 1 child in the high school, and I feel like I have skin in the game relative to making sure we do everything possible to keep our schools as safe as they can be. In that regard, the town, along with the police commission, has done an amazing job in securing the schools, both through the security officers that are in the schools and the 2 school resource officers. That was a program very difficult to push through in the beginning. I was spearheading that, and it was something that had resistance. And it had resistance for a number of reasons. One was parents didn't want officers with guns in the schools. Well, it's turned out that these school resource officers are helpful as far as security, but not a first line of security in relation to what they do. What they do is get to know the kids, and they're preemptive in problems that come up. The children and students form relationships with these school resource officers, and that is something that helps them before any issue happens that would be of a safety concern. So that program has worked very well, and now that we have two, we're possibly considering two more. But both from a town standpoint, from the parent standpoint, and from the school administrative standpoint, everyone's gotten behind the school resource officer program. We constantly at every meeting discuss other ways to improve safety. Both the mile of safety, as Bill mentioned, which is the road that is where the 4 schools are on the campus, and we're very lucky to have those on the campus, as well as enforcing during the day. We have the 2 officers at either end of School Road and during the school, and also the 2 school resource officers in the schools.
I'm afraid that's time also. Mr. Muller.
I won't repeat the excellent comments of the other up here. I was the last school year in 1st grade to do duck and cover. So I can date myself there. My daughter is now a kindergarten teacher and does active shooter training with her kindergartners. And I find, and our children, I know Jess's and my children are all the same age, and that their entire lives to date have been about school violence and what that does to their psyche and how they look at the world, and it terrifies me. I was a selectman here in Weston during the Sandy Hook tragedy, so was very intimately involved for multiple years in how do you bring safety to what is essentially an open campus. So it is something it has occupied hours and hours of my time sitting in private deliberations, and there's a lot about school safety that obviously can't be addressed, because if you tell everybody what you're doing, you obviously defeat the purpose of having it. But certainly the SROs are invaluable. I'm also probably the only one up here who has had his home address and phone number posted on the NRA website, and has received hate mail and had to get the FBI involved when we, as the Board of Selectmen, tried to address the issues of gun violence, ultimately only partially successfully. So this is a topic that I would wish I had 20 minutes to talk about rather than just one to respond, but this is the one that I think is the one that hits us all as individuals the most personally. Traffic is obviously critical. Enforcement is critical, but the safety of my children and everyone else's children is absolutely paramount. And that is where, if I had to start cutting, it would be everywhere but ensuring the safety of the under 18s in this town.
Okay, thank you all. Next question goes back to Mr. Brady first. What training is given to officers about handling domestic violence cases? Is that sufficient training?
That's an interesting question, because domestic violence actually is the number 2, I would say, problem that police officers face today from a safety standpoint. More officers get shot in domestic violence situations. The first one is, of course, traffic stops. Those are the 2 where we lose most officers in the United States. But from a standpoint, yes, we train our officers constantly. In fact, I just attended the training session that we had for police officers this year. We have it on an annual basis. The chief and the captain and the sergeants put it all together, and they train the officers in the changes that have been forced on us, if you will, from the state. We have 16 policies that the commission has approved, and we are now in line with that. One of the policies is domestic violence. How do the officers handle that? They train to handle that, and we call some of that verbal judo. I don't know if you've ever heard of that word, but instead of putting your hand on your weapon or on your taser, you use verbal judo in order to try and alleviate the situation as best as possible. Domestic violence is also one of the things where we have more officers that get hurt, believe it or not. When you have somebody that's out of control and you try to control them, that gets to be a real problem for our guys. They throw their shoulders out, or they fall down, trying to stop somebody from jumping out of a window. I mean, all of these things happen. And of course, when a police officer goes out on injury, then we have to backfill for that officer to some extent. And that puts, we're a very small force. We have 17 police officers. And that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that you have officers on duty here in the town of Weston.
Thank you. Mr. Di Pasquale.
So I think when you answer that question about various issues and crimes in town, especially domestic violence, it comes back to attracting, hiring, and retaining the best officers. And I think we as a commission have done our job in that respect. And I have heard the stories that get reported at our police commission meetings about domestic violent incidents. And I am convinced that our officers are very sensitive to the issues of domestic violence, very well trained in that regard. And for a town like ours, and the citizens in this town really know the proper method of how to handle a situation that could easily get out of control. And I think the reason for that is, as a commission, what we do mainly is oversee policy, and as Bill said, we do have a domestic violence policy for our offices, and we handle management of the command staff, and most importantly, we make sure these officers know what to do in every situation that could possibly come up with the citizens of Weston. So in that regard, I think we do have a very good policy for domestic violence, and I believe that we continue to train our officers in all the different things that develop on the state level in regards to that specific crime, and all issues in town that these officers have a sensitivity for. Most importantly, our officers know the character of our town. They know our people, and they know how to treat our people. And I think that's very, very important for a police department. We're not like other towns. We're very special.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Muller.
Thanks very much. I was picking up on the last comment. I mean, this is essentially a question of balancing empathy and sympathy with authority. And again, in a small town with roughly 10,000 people, knowing where issues may arise. I think the whole issue of domestic violence ultimately leads back to the question about gun safety. And I know that one of the topics that we had discussed several years back is ensuring that the officers know when there's a weapon in a house. Not only the declared ones, but where there's a threat, there's something that you don't know. And never sending an officer into a situation where there is the potential, before you even get in the door, that the whole gun violence question really rises. It also deals with substance abuse, and it's an issue that blends a lot of kind of soft science with hard enforcement. And so I think that the training that is in place is excellent at this point. I don't think there can ever be enough training, because as we see with evolving psychological methods, the roots of some of these concerns on domestic violence are constantly changing. And I think that you need to deal with this both the understanding and the empathy for the situation, but also ensuring the public safety and the safety of those individuals in the house and those that may be neighbors.
Ms. Growling.
We have more domestic violence incidents in Weston than most citizens understand, and it's very difficult. Our officers are constantly being trained. One of the things I'm proud that the Police Commission has done is, when we choose officers, we're looking for a particular type of person, because Weston is unique. And we need an officer who can have an understanding and empathy in the town. These domestic violence instances are dangerous to our officers. That's why they wear vests, bulletproof vests. When you go into a house, they have no idea who has a gun, what that person's mental state is, etc. That's why I agree with David, it goes down to gun control also. As I said, we train our officers constantly, and we'll keep doing that, and that's one of the major things that we have to continue doing in this town and as a police commissioner, because it's very dangerous and also very important.
Okay, thank you all. Next question will go to Mr. De Pasquale first. How can the police department and police commission more effectively contribute to reducing the incidence of teenage drug and alcohol usage?
Very good question. We could talk a lot about this. There are many programs that we're involved in now in relation to reducing drug and alcohol in the schools because we are able to, through education of our youth in town, allow them to understand the importance of abuse. So in that regard, we have programs where the officers and SROs speak to our students. We have other town initiatives that help our students understand the dangers of drug and alcohol abuse. We have training for our officers, all of our officers, that when they do make stops, when they do get called to various parties in Weston, where they do observe underage drinking or drug abuse, that they know exactly what to do and what steps to take to handle the situation. Importantly, we've installed a drug take-back program in the lobby of the police department, and it's turned out to be very, very effective. Pounds and pounds and pounds of pharmaceuticals have been dropped off by people that have them in their medicine cabinets or are able to get them out of the house, which helps in the situation with alleviating abuse of those drugs. So we're very proud that that program has been implemented, and it's been utilized a great deal by townspeople. And we'll continue in our efforts of both education of drug abuse and programs that address alcohol and drug abuse with our youth in Weston.
Mr. Mueller.
Yes, thank you. This is an issue that goes back to the parents. I mean, I remember the discussion about the potential marijuana dispensaries in Westport and a group of parents concerned that this would be a bad influence on their children. And my comment is a medical marijuana dispensary is not the problem. The problem is the kids that your kids are meeting, the people that drive up School Road, and I know from firsthand reporting, stopping and having kids walking out from the school, taking something from the window, and the person drives away. That's happening in Weston. So you can't kid yourself that this doesn't exist. It is a huge issue. It's parents allowing parties to occur. It's not having an ability to tell well, you can just by a phone call, but an anonymous tip line to say, there's underage drinking going on, or I know that the corner of this road or this baseball park is where someone is going and they are buying drugs. And that is occurring. And I think that some of us know, all of us know that it occurs. And I think it's having the courage to stand up and tell your neighbor that it's not okay to have a party and have your kids serving alcohol to other kids. Now, this is an issue that has been around certainly since I was in high school. I don't think this is anything new. I think the severity comes from the drug side of it. Because drinking, for whatever you can say about it, it occurs. And the question is it occurring where people's lives are at risk? And we have to be very careful there. But I think the bigger and increasing issue is opiates and other abuse of medicinal products. Jess makes a good point about the drug drop-off in the lobby. I've used it just to get stuff out of you. There's no reason after shoulder surgery that I needed 60 oxycodone pills. I didn't need 59 of them. Probably didn't need 60. But that is the sort of stuff that is in medicine cabinets. And just like in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, people going in and slipping that bottle out of their parents' bar, that's what they're doing today by going up to the medicine cabinet.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Growlett.
I don't know what's left to be said. They've all said it. Okay, yeah. Drugs are more of a problem in our schools these days than alcohol was when my son and daughter were there many years ago. Our officers are aware of that. They monitor it. One of the major helps in this area are our SROs. School resource officers get to know the kids really well, and the kids will talk to the school resource officer before they'll talk to maybe their parent or a guidance counselor at the schools. And our SROs have that kind of relationship and therefore can deal with kids who either tell them about drug issues, someone who has a drug problem, and we've been very successful and will continue to keep doing this and being successful. The drug take-back program that Jess and Bill and David mentioned is a very good idea, because David's right. There's just too many drugs out there in our homes, and that's where our kids get them. As David said, years ago, they went and stole a bottle of scotch out of a bar. Now they go into a medicine cabinet and steal whatever's sitting in there, and there's a lot sitting in there.
Okay, Mr. Brady?
Alcohol has been a problem since I was growing up. Seems to be a problem at the current time. Just last night, I was hearing some noise out on my street, and a couple of kids were walking down the street, and you knew that they had been a party someplace, and they had been drinking. It was obvious by the way they were so loud and, not disruptive to call the police, call 911 and see what they were all about. But we've seen that a lot in the town of Weston. I'm more concerned with the drug aspect at this point in time. The drug take-back program that we've put in place in the lobby of the 24/7 lobby, by the way, I want to mention, is approved by the DEA. The box collects, on average, 30 pounds of drugs every month. We take those drugs with 2 officers up to the incinerator. They have to sign it in. They have to watch it go into the incinerator until it's completely incinerated. Then they have to sign out. And we do that because in the past, a lot of these drugs were just put up there in bags, and of course you know what can happen then. If somebody's not watching, okay, these things happen to go back on the street again. Fentanyl has become a real problem in drugs. Oxycodone, quite frankly, when you use this stuff and these kids get it on the street, you don't know where that's coming from. All of a sudden we have a dead teenager. I mean, that's terrible. We don't need that type of thing in the town of Weston. When it occurs, wherever that occurs now, the laboratory that we have, okay, the forensic laboratory that we have on campus, is what we use to go after the drug dealers. We find out who the teenagers are buying them from, who the dealer is. We trace the dealer back. We have the mutual assistance by all of it. It goes into the FBI database, and all of that stuff then is
Okay.
thrown out to us when we get to the where are these drugs coming from, how do we stop them?
Okay, that I'm afraid is time. All right, next question will go to Mr. Mueller first. What training is given to officers about handling mental health-related incidents? Is it sufficient to the need?
Can you ever have enough training to deal with mental health? I don't think the answer to that is yes. I think that as we talked about with the whole domestic violence, this is kind of an extension of the same issue, mental health. My son's an EMT here in Weston, and you just hear anecdotally, he's very careful with HIPAA, but you hear about the sheer volume of mental health calls. And there's, again, sensitivity and understanding it, but the training that is required is a continuing push in the psychology side. What's driving people to mental health issues? I think that there's a big link to substance abuse. It's amazing how a lot of these questions are all pulling from the same pool. So I think that you have an adequate number of training opportunities to deal with mental health. I don't think you can ever have sufficient training. I think you need to ensure that it is linked to understanding about the substance abuse. It gets again to the whole issue of gun violence. But I think that's a serious concern. I'm not even going to use my full 2 minutes. I think that you could spend hours talking about the access to adequate training, and so I'll leave it at that.
Ms. Grelnick?
Our officers go through training, all different types of training. Mental health problems, part of that training. We just had 2 instances in the past couple of months that dealt with mentally ill people. They're very difficult to control. Our officers were right there. Some got injured dealing with this. As David said, I don't think you can ever have enough training in this area. And you have to look at the underlying causes, and you also have to look at some of the parents and how they're dealing with their problem at their home. The schools deal with it. I don't really know what the answer is, but all I can say is that our department deals with this, and we just will keep working at it.
Okay, Mr. Brady.
Well, yes, we deal frequently with mental health calls, and in fact, there was one where one of our officers, two of our officers actually got injured on the job, trying to control a particular person who was out of control, trying to run into traffic. So you're trying to save this person's life and you get injured at doing it. The JRB, the Juvenile Review Board that we belong to in town, has been very helpful. Also, when these kids get in trouble along those lines, they have counselors that they can utilize. It's a way of taking care of children when they have that type of need. Our officers are trained to do that type of thing, but it stops there. An officer is not really the counselor that particular individual may need. And it's not always children, by the way. We have adults here in the town of Weston that have some mental issues, and our patrol is constantly called to their homes. They could probably relate the names of the people and who's in the house and where it is and how long it takes them to get there, because that's how many times they've been there during a period of a year. So it is a concern for the police department. We keep on training as best as we can. Things come down, edicts come down from the state. I call them unfunded mandates for training, okay? So we have to train our officers along those lines, and I think we do a pretty good job of it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. DePasquale?
So I believe that mental health and understanding mental health and getting the proper assistance for people that have mental health issues is the most important thing that we have to deal with, both on a national scene and, of course, in our town locally. I believe in conjunction with proper gun control, mental health is the key issue as to why we're having the incidence of mass shootings we're having today, which is a horrible situation. So on a local front, from specifically how we've been training officers in regards to mental health, I break it down in two ways. One, in relation to the schools, and then with general citizens. In relation to the schools, the SROs have training specifically in mental health for adolescents and younger, and I think they're doing an amazing job. I could give you example after example where we have discussed situations with specific students and how to handle those situations, and I think the Weston Police Department has done an excellent job both in the sensitivity of how they handle things with the families when children are come forward with mental health issues due to some problems at home, and as well as what they do to help the parents manage the children with mental health. So from the school resource officers, from the, as Bill said, the juvenile board, to counselors in the school, I think we're doing an excellent job in pinpointing mental health for the students. The officers are also trained generally within the town to help adult mental health problems that do come up from time to time that can cause some violent behavior. So they're very well trained in that area as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Next question goes to Ms. Gralnick first. With the absence of the Weston Forum, what are the resources you would tend to use to communicate the Commission's top priorities and vital information to the community?
It's kind of the question that was asked at the State of the Town a couple of weeks ago with our selectmen. We have very many outlets. We have Weston Today. We have Margaret Wurtenberg, who attends our meetings and gets the word out. We have Facebook. We have a presence on Facebook. Town of Weston Police Department has a presence on Facebook. And through using all these platforms, I think we're doing a pretty good job of getting our message out. Yes, of course it could be better. I don't think it's just because we don't have a newspaper. Things are different. This is the digital age, especially with younger people. So it's important that we use digital methods for getting our message out. And some of us here might be of a past generation that had nothing but newspapers. But we're learning, and we're getting better at it, and I think it's successful.
Mr. Brady?
I can remember going to the post office and to mail some items and looking around in the trash and picking up the current Weston Forum because there were so many in the trash, and I used to think, gee, people aren't really reading this thing? You know, they're just throwing it away. Well, we're in a digital age right now, and it's new to us, quite frankly. It certainly is new in what we're doing right now. We're trying to utilize the digital age. We have Ted Craft, but that's only one. Then we have the Patch, I guess, is another, and the Westport Daily is another one. And these are all the digital, where we get our digital information today, okay? And it's not only the phone, it's the TV, et cetera, okay? It's no longer picking up a newspaper. Most people are just reading everything off of their telephones today. I don't know, the digital world is changing us, let's face it. We're going to adapt. We'll figure it out and how we can address these types of things. I'm always looking for some method of giving information to the people in the town of Weston without actually picking up a telephone call and making a call. But you've noticed the emergency management types of things. The reverse calls that we put out are very great. They're terrific for us because they do, let us know what's going on in a particular situation. So I think just we're in a digital world today, and we're just going to adapt to it.
Mr. DePasquale?
So there are many ways in Weston for people to get information, specifically in relation to what's going on in the Weston PD and what is going on around town in relation to safety. The police department has their own website. I think Weston Today has done a great job in informing people in town as to things that are going on and in relation to the police department as well. We have the Patch. We have various social media sites set up by people, as well as the town bulletin board. And we have, in relation to town safety, getting the word out through emergency services, mainly texting and voicemail at home. So as the people in town have adapted to new ways of communicating, since we don't have a Weston Forum anymore, I think that we do inform the town well. I think we've adapted well, and I think we just have to continue to get the word out in a fashion that reaches people on every level in the lifestyle they are leading today, and we just have to be sensitive to how communication and technology has changed. And we continue to think about that at our police commission meetings and come up with ideas. It goes back to what I said about a PR campaign in relation to speeding. We feel it's very important to educate people in relation to speeding, and by doing so, you have to figure out how to reach them and how to tell them, how to improve things and how to drive slower and so on. So we will continue to look at areas to reach the people in our town and do an excellent job communicating to them about pertinent issues with the Weston Police Department.
Mr. Mueller?
Thank you. I think the selectmen are to be commended for their efforts in looking to find ways to replace what was a town newspaper. At the State of the Town, there was discussion of changing the website to a push concept rather than a pull concept. That is, you actually have to opt out to getting information. I think that's an excellent way of replacing what you could normally read in a newspaper. I think the big risk here is to town cohesion, and that we've seen since the end of a daily or a weekly newspaper a disparity in the level of knowledge in town. Some people keeping up. It's easier to keep up with what's going on when you have kids in the school system and when you have kids in activities, because you have places that bring you together. And I think once you get past that point, other than an organization you may belong to, you lose that link to a broader network of people. And I think that's the critical bridge to cross. My colleagues up here have all mentioned social media. We've certainly seen bulletins coming from the first selectman when there's adverse weather, but you actually have to be on Facebook to get that. And so I think that this concept of a push strategy of getting news out to people, it's then their option whether to read it or not. And I think that since the police department is an arm of the town, one of the arms of the town, its ability to communicate with people in town about changes, about policies, any other initiatives could easily use the same system, a push system of getting information out through electronic means. We still don't have a replacement. I don't think there's going to be a replacement for sitting there and reading your newspaper with your cup of coffee. But I think that when I was on the survey committee that got more than 2,000 responses. People do want to be engaged in the town. They do want information, and that came through loud and clear in some of the questions about understanding what's going on in town. And the police department is obviously a critical part of that, as are other town departments. And getting that information into people's computers in their hands is critical.
Thank you. All right, next question goes to Mr. Brady first. The commission received funds for purchase of a drone in the last budget. What are you using it for, and what should it be used for in the coming years?
Yeah, that's a good question. At the present time, we've trained two of our officers are trained as drone pilots. The drones in question are pretty much used for finding people. They get lost in the woods. They have infrared capabilities. These are commercial type of drones, okay? The ones that our two pilots are using at the current time were just the ones that you and I could purchase. You still have to get certified. You have to get a drone license, and you're regulated by the regulatory agency that handles the drones. You can't fly them over groups of people. So if at the center, at town hall, when we were gathering together, you noticed that the drone wasn't completely over. It was off in the distance, and it was taking pictures from that way. So there are lots of laws that, and you can't fly them near airports. You already know that. You've heard about the drone problem around airports. But from a police standpoint, when people do get lost, or if you need to look in the reservoir, say, instead of taking a boat out and searching, you can actually fly a drone over. So you can get an awful lot of information in a short period of time, saving the police and emergency response, fire and EMS, time in finding those people that may be lost. That's just one of the things that a drone can do. There are probably other things that I'm not quite aware of yet, but I'll get educated on in the near future.
Mr. DePasquale.
I love drones. I think that new technology has really opened up a lot of new paths for us here in Weston as it relates to the police department and safety. My two sons have drones, and they are somewhat amateur drone pilots, so I'm very well attuned to how to use them now, and they could fly a drone from my house at Pheasant Hill over to Weston Center, see what's going on their iPhone, have the drone return, and I don't even have to get out of the kitchen to know what's going on down there. So it's really amazing technology. But I think we're just at the infant stage of using them in Weston. We really haven't had any incidents yet where we've had safety concerns, where we've utilized a drone to help any of our citizens. But for the future, I think Bill laid out exactly what they can be used for, and that's people getting lost at Devil's Den, that's utilizing them by the reservoir, that's overseeing crowds, perhaps 4th of July, Memorial Day. We had a few traffic issues and a few snarls during the parade, and perhaps a drone could have given our officers a preemptive view towards that. It also, it certainly helps to document things, an accident. A drone could take a nice aerial picture of something that's happened on Weston Road or construction on Weston Road. So it's a nice technology. It's an important technology. We have officers trained on that, and we're going to continue to use that in Weston on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Mr. Mueller?
Well, it's taken us an hour and 5 minutes for me to finally find something that I disagree with. I don't like drones. I think they're useful, and I'll get to that, but I think many of us have been in situations where you're looking at a beautiful landscape in a national park, and this little darn thing starts flying over because someone wants a better view. So that's the one disagreement we've really had so far. Where can they be of use, however? My colleagues sitting up here have identified a few situations. I think providing quicker access than a human can provide. I can certainly think of situations after storms when you want to survey storm damage. We can think back, unfortunately it hasn't been that frequent in the last couple of years, but go back 5, 6, 7 years and where we were having 2, 3, 4 storms and all roads in and out of town were closed because of downed wires and downed trees. That's a critical situation where having an ability to survey from the air would be beneficial. Certainly in a fuel spill or in an environmental issue, if a truck's going through town, being able to look from above with a drone rather than endangering an officer or just regular citizen's life, getting too close to something until you know what's going on. I think those are the ideal situations where a drone can be used. But don't put them in the national parks.
Ms. Growley?
Drones can be particularly useful in Weston because we're such a wooded community, especially in areas where there might be a lost child, a lost adult, etc., and that's a good use of a drone. Like David said, I can also see them used for like a fuel spill where you don't want to endanger the safety of your officer. So, as with everything else, as we're moving forward, new technology, we have officers who are trained to use drones and will continue to do that, but to do it in a responsible way. I wouldn't want drones flying all over Town Hall and all over Weston. Even in a parade, I wouldn't want a drone.
All right, thank you all. The next question goes to Mr. DePasquale first. The town plan consultant has reviewed traffic counts and analyzed them recently. What input can you offer to the expansion of the town center proposal along Route 57?
Well, we'll need a lot more than 2 minutes for that one. But what we can see, all of us can see, without even looking at the data we look at on the police commission, is that traffic right now has increased at the corner of Weston Road and Northfield Road. Traffic on Weston Road in general is much more of a commuter issue than it ever was. And there's so much traffic traveling north to south to go to the Merritt and during the commuter times than ever before. So in general, traffic control right now is an issue, and our officers do the best job possible, and I would say an amazing job, in maintaining the flow of traffic, even when there's construction on Weston Road and future planned construction, and keeping the speed of that traffic as moderate as possible. And that's all monitoring, and that's all making traffic stops when necessary, and being sensitive to this new volume coming through town, which is growing each year. Now, when you look at that in relation to planned development, perhaps at Weston Center, some of the meetings that I've attended, and I've attended all of them, are quite ambitious. And I think in relation to improving Weston Center, which is not town property, is private property, It's a long way off as far as the proposed development we've heard. I think our development in town has great momentum, and I compliment the Selectmen Board for the work they've done and the vision they have. But I think it's going to be a slow process of baby steps to get to where we have to combine the vision of the town as far as development and the growth and traffic that would bring. That will bring a lot of new studies, and we will be part of it.
Time, I'm afraid. Mr. Mueller?
Yeah, thank you. Look, we saw in the town survey that there's a huge demand for more infrastructure, more facilities, more support in the town. But we have a natural limitation. We have essentially 2 roads that intersect, and people living very close. I live just above what is this area, this downtown area. So there's this natural limit to the type of growth that occur. I know that one of the things that must be considered, and this was discussed once several years back, is do you want growth on the property where the Onion Barn is today? And the biggest issue there is having public access directly leading onto a school playground. And this is a huge school safety issue of having people stopping, no control, parking lots. Essentially, you don't know who's going to be there, and having young school children, our youngest, playing right behind there. And I think that that's a huge safety issue that has to be concerned when looking at how we address the issue of expansion. The town every 10 years does a town plan for conservation and development. And I think that there are 3 critical words. There's a plan, there is conservation, and there is development. And you need the plan. You need to have this be a thoughtful approach to addressing what the town survey addressed, or what it learned in terms of what people expect and what they want in town. And we do have to factor in, as I said up front, the natural restraints we have with Weston Road, with Norfield Road, and the fairly limited space we have to expand. I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Grellman?
In terms of traffic control, one of the things that will be done in the near future is, as mentioned before, a better flow onto School Road in the morning and in the afternoons. State DOT is expected to come and to alleviate part of that problem by doing a bump out if you're coming southbound on Route 57, so that traffic will not back up waiting for parents, et cetera, to make that left-hand turn onto School Road, and the same in the other direction. Part of the town plan and the future of Weston also is going to involve sidewalks, and I'm on the sidewalk committee. And sidewalks will be a great help in this town, especially when we figure out where to place them in relationship to Weston Center. People do need a safer, better place to walk, bike, etc., especially children. We found that kids leave school in the afternoon and come darting across Weston Road through the woods, not necessarily at the crosswalk. So we're hoping that sidewalks will help this situation, and I think it will.
Mr. Brady?
As long as I've been here, we've talked about some sort of expansion of town center or things like town center in various locations, even in the town of Weston. But, as far as the town plan, because if it comes to pass, and when I say if it comes to pass, we're talking about a private entity there. The town does not own the town center. Now, if the town, if it's up for sale and the town wishes to purchase that, then I think that plan is very viable. But quite frankly, until that actually happens, there's not much you're going to be able to do about it. That hasn't changed in the 38 years that I've been here. As far as the safety around the town center, we try to do things like the crosswalk, okay? That crosswalk is there. We had the hedges cut back by the ball field, okay? Because the kids, when you're driving down the road and you've all done it, you've seen the kids come out and all of a sudden it shocks you. You slam on the brakes because, you didn't expect somebody to come running out of the woods like that. That's helped a little bit. The sidewalks, as Beth mentioned, should help also, because then you'll have a visible person to see as they're walking along the sidewalk before they get to the crosswalks. But from a police commission standpoint, quite frankly, until you decide to do something, you don't have to come to the police commission from a safety issue. We want to see a plan that is going to be utilized. And when we see those types of plans, then the commission as a whole will look for the safety issues that will be associated with that particular plan, and we'll start to work on it at that point in time. It's not as if we're looking for things to do, quite frankly. This commission is very, very busy, and you're not even hearing half of what we do on the commission at the present time, although this would be a beautiful forum just for the police commission to come and talk to you about all the things that we actually get involved in the town of Weston.
Okay, thank you all. Next question goes to Mr. Mueller first. Should the commission run a safety program, either for students in the schools or for everyone, on speeding?
Yes.
He has 4 yeses.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Brady
Yes.
and Mr. DePasquale?
Can I use everybody's?
1 minute.
I yield my time.
Well, obviously, the answer is yes, but just to expand a little more on that, the reason it is so important in the schools is because I have 5 children, so I understand when they get their permit and they get their license eventually, and there's certain regulations that first year when they have their licenses, that understanding speeding, traffic control devices around Weston, safely going to and from school, from their homes, is just so important. And we do address it in the schools through the police department, and we can do more of it. And I believe we should do more of it, because I think it's one of the single most important things in our town is when you have a 16-year-old in a car with a permit, you have a 17-year-old with a new license driving around the roads of Weston. These are very, very difficult roads to navigate. We all know that, with their curves and twists and turns. Sometimes the roads aren't that well maintained. Sometimes it's icy, snowy, and wet. And young drivers many times do not understand the ramifications of that. And I've lived through it from a very personal, home situation of telling my kids to be careful, going back and forth, driving them when I felt that the conditions weren't good enough for them to drive themselves. So I think that each and every one of us who has children in town, and those whose children have grown or don't have children, have to be concerned about young drivers in our town, because it truly does affect all of us, specifically in relation to speeding, because they don't understand sometimes the speed limits on the roads, and sometimes the ramifications of going too fast. And it's physics, and that's true. I mean, you have to understand speed in relation to traffic control and knowing when to stop.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that is time. There will be time for possibly 2 more questions, and then we're going to go to the closings. This one goes to Ms. Gralnick, and it's informational. What is the most frequent crime committed in Weston, and what is the most serious?
Obviously, a most serious crime would be where a death occurred. Fortunately, those are few and far between in Weston. Most of the crimes nowadays in Weston involve domestic violence, as we talked about earlier. They're dangerous not only to the people involved, but to our police officers. We don't have much crime in Weston, as all of you know, but we do have some. And as we've said earlier and before, our officers are trained in all sorts of situations that you'd think would never occur in this town, but they do. But to answer the initial question, the most of our crimes do involve domestic disputes.
Okay. Mr. Brady?
As far as frequent crime, you ought to understand some of the statistics for this. The police department takes approximately 6,000 calls a year. Of that, 1,600 of them are crime-related calls. As Commissioner Gralnick had said, many of those are domestic violence calls, but there are lots of other things. You don't hear about these things, quite frankly, because that's part of an investigation that may be going on. But to give you an example, there was a home invasion in Weston, which some of you may have known about if you lived on the street. And the response to that home invasion, the 4 or 5 individuals that were involved in that made a big mistake in coming to the town of Weston. Because with the mutual aid that we have, we not only had the 2 patrolmen that were on duty at the same time, but we happened to have at that point the meeting going on in the forensic lab with 10 additional officers that came to getting involved in that. So you were up to 12. All of a sudden, we had Wilton, Westport, Easton, and Reading coming in. So these guys were surrounded by, 15 to 20 police officers. Nowhere to go. They were all arrested. And I followed that case a little bit over the years, okay, and I think they've all spent at least 5 years in prison at the present time. But you don't hear about all of these things, and rightfully so. We don't talk about things that are being investigated at the present time. It's just one of those things. We do all the work for it. It's turned over to the courts, and quite frankly, many times we don't even know how that situation turns out. But, you've heard of the Doulas case, okay? What you don't know is a lot of that work is being done right here in Weston.
Okay, Mr. DePasquale.
So it's interesting. The most frequent crimes, if you could call them crimes, when you look at the statistics that we view every month are alarms going off, people's homes, most incidences each month of what our officers have to respond to, and of course traffic stops. So that's from a frequency standpoint. So from the alarms going off, whether it's a real situation, a faulty alarm, false alarm, or storm related, that really should be the responsibility of the homeowner to try to maintain their system so officers don't have to go out to people's homes as much as they do. And it's so significant and wastes so much time and really dollars that everybody needs to at least adhere to that understanding to maintain their alarm system so we don't get false alarms all over town. We used to fine for that after the 3rd incident, and no one paid the fine, and I don't even believe we're sending out those fines anymore, but we do send notices out. I don't know if anyone in this room has ever paid a fine for their alarm system going off. Please let me know. The most serious crimes, I think, from my standpoint, and when you look at what we discuss each month, is certainly domestic violence. Very sad situation. Someone usually gets arrested when an officer shows up. These officers we have in Weston are so well trained to maintain a calmness when they show up on the scene and to understand what's going on and be sensitive that these are people in Weston and citizens that need help. So that's the most serious, and I think they handle it very well. The second one I think we have to address seriously, and we could talk much more about, is underage drinking. That is something we addressed briefly before with this panel, and it's so important, and it comes down to education, and I think the school resource officers are doing an excellent job in that, and it has to do with the home situation and parents understanding how to educate their children.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mueller.
I won't expand on the factual side, what the numbers actually say. I think other things that are significant issues of ID theft and being able to go to the police department here when you believe that your identity has been compromised. I don't know if anyone else got it, but I got a letter about a year ago that read something like, I was working on a job in Weston and I came across the little things that you were doing, and unless you send me $173,000 via Bitcoin, I'm going to start sending copies of the photos that I have to you and your friends. Now, I was trying to think back to all the horrible things I'd done in my entire life, and I really couldn't think of anything that was worth $173,000 in Bitcoin. But being able to call the police department, to speak to the detective here, to realize that I was not alone, and it was all coming out of one of the identity thefts from one of the credit cards. They chose the most affluent zip codes, and we're just starting to send letters out. So that, maybe it's not frequent, so that doesn't address the specific question here, but it's certainly something where I have had personal interaction, and I believe that there are plenty of others who deal with identity theft. And then obviously the issues that my colleagues up here have mentioned in terms of domestic violence and alcohol and substance abuse would be critical things for me.
All right, this is going to be the last question before closing. Yes, sir, Mr. Ray.
Just for your own edification,
30 seconds.
if you have identity theft, like David had just mentioned, please contact the police department. You have 72 hours, okay? And within that 72 hours, if you can get to the police department detective as quickly as possible, we're able to find out where that money went and reverse anything that may have occurred, okay? And we do this through the fine send. And this is something that we're working with the Secret Service on. And they help us with it. So, it's worked in the past, and we've gotten money back for people who have been duped. So, if that happens to you, by all means, please call the detective.
That's time on extension, so yes. All right, this is the last question before closing. It will go to Mr. Brady first. What is the biggest single issue for the police commissioners to address in the near future?
I think the single biggest issue, quite frankly, is maintaining the safety of our schools. I mean, that's where we are. It's not, you have a little center over here, and that's pretty safe the way it is, but you've got all of our children in one place, coming in on buses and going to the schools. So I think it's important for us to maintain that, to make sure that the SROs are doing their job, that the police officers that are available are up and down the road, that we interface with the children, that they know that they can go to SROs and the police, to get help when they need it. And we've prevented an awful lot of things from going on in the schools, which you haven't heard about, okay? And that's the intent. When somebody makes a threat in a school, there's a way of handling that type of thing. We go back and we check it and we find out whether or not it was a viable threat, or is it just some kid, watching too many movies and thinking he could say something offline. And if that's the case, then we get that juvenile review board in place. And instead of putting this kid in juvenile detention centers, they may be given some community service hours, which a couple of 100 hours, and all of a sudden the kid starts to think about it. Hey, I'm going to start on the straight and narrow throw. So I think from that standpoint, that's one of the things that we have to. There are other things, of course. The second thing is making sure that our police department maintains the current standards, if you will, of what's going on in the state, from the federal government to the state government, and ensuring that we have the proper tools in order to do the job as we move along in the town of Weston.
Mr. DePasquale.
So Bill was very articulate in explaining the importance of the SRO program. I'll expand a little bit on that because I do think it's the single most important thing that we have in this town, and that is protection of our schools, safety of our children. It's why many people move to this town. And I'm a big believer that you cannot educate well unless you provide a safe environment. And I think we are doing an unbelievable job in providing that safe environment. And of course, we're certainly educating well. That's what we're best known for. Hopefully that will continue to keep our real estate values perhaps going a bit up from where they are today. But that's certainly the industry we have in town as we look towards the vision of Weston. So in that regard, we're looking at 2 more school resource officers, one in the intermediate school and one in Hurlbut. That will have considerations in relation to the budget, so we have to balance that carefully as to better interaction in the schools as well as the budget. Lastly, preemptive interaction with the SROs and our kids, I think, is most important because they find problems before they develop, and that has been example after that. Lastly, speeding, traffic control, and the safety of our roads is critical for the town of Weston, and that's an area that I will continue to look at areas that we can improve and help our officers do the best job possible for our roads. It's so important for the safety of Weston.
Thank you. Mr. Mueller?
It's very hard to add to what Jess and Bill has said. I think that the responsibility of the government is to ensure the safety of its largest industry and that which drives the town, which drives the community, and that's clearly our schools. I won't reiterate what my colleagues have most aptly said. Certainly road safety and safety of being in the community. And I guess that gets the broadest issue. Personally, I travel a fair amount for work. My wife is at home. My kids are occasionally at this point at home. I kind of want the scariest thing my wife to think about is the red fox howling outside and terrifying the entire house until you go online and say, what is that scary noise I hear in the dark? You actually can push a button and it identifies the animal that's making the noise, so you can look for that. But that should be the biggest risk. That should be the biggest threat. And I think that we need to continue to ensure through financial resources, ensuring adequate staffing, the safety of our biggest industry, and that is our schools. Thanks.
Ms. Groundling?
I'll be short and brief. I agree with what everybody said. It's basically our top priority is the safety of our schools and our kids. As David said, that's our industry in town. And we work on it constantly. Our officers are constantly being upgraded in their police training to deal with school security and safety. So that is the number one priority.
All right. At this point, closing statements. Timers, the candidates were told they have only 30 seconds for each closing statement. It can be on anything from why they should be elected to what they think ought to be done. It's their call. 30 seconds each, starting with Mr. DePasquale.
So I think that we have tremendous amount of momentum on the Police Commission, and what I ask is that you allow myself and whoever else you decide is appropriate on our Board of Police Commissioners to continue our great work. It takes a matter of experience, and I've been on the commission for 14 years. As most things in town and boards, we're volunteers, there's no compensation, but what I think I'm best at is providing my viewpoints, energy, and availability for the town to serve on the Police Commission. I have children in the school, and I believe very much in the safety as Weston grows.
Okay.
Thank you, and I appreciate your vote.
Thank you.
Is everybody else going to get 48 seconds?
We can probably all take the extra 15.
Let me say this. Everybody's still supposed to get 30 seconds, but if they're in the middle of a sentence, I'll let them go on. Okay?
Just use lots of commas.
Please, not too many ums and ers. Mr. Mueller, please.
Sure. Look, I'm not up here. I'm not running against Jess, or I'm not running against Bill. These are all people who have done incredible jobs serving the town. My perspective is I'm running to offer the benefit of 16 years in town government on the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and on the Library Board. I have the experience in budgeting. I certainly, from day one, dealt with school safety issues. And I think back to when my now college senior was in 8th grade and in his mentorship program with Officer Powers, and sitting out with an officer who took the time for an entire week to spend with my 8th grader. That is emblematic of the sort of police department we have in town, and I would love to continue to help support that department.
Thank you. Ms. Groundling.
I'm running for the Police Commission because I want to continue to provide the town with the highly experienced, professional, and respected police department, and to ensure the safety of everyone in Weston, and also to maintain the positive relationship between our police office and all of Weston's citizens. I've been on the Police Commission for over 20 years. I've seen the town change, I've seen the police department change, and I want to be a part of that change also.
Thank you. Mr. Brady.
I believe our police commission is really outstanding. We work diligently. We work hard. I'm being retired. I have the time to do that. We attend all the meetings for the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, Board of Education, Building Committee. Anytime there's a police matter, we're there to address it. I've been on the commission now for 20-plus years also. I'm the current chairman of the Police Commission. I'd like to continue in that job if you'll have me, and so I'm asking for your vote as well.
Thank you. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I would like to thank all 4 of the candidates who are up here. They did a wonderful job. You guys in Weston don't know how lucky you are. I want to thank the people who submitted the questions we asked and the equally good ones we never got around to. It's up to you. The election is November 5. Go vote.